Sergey Lavrov has announced today that he is perfectly willing to meet with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio to try and find an end to this war. But as you can see on your screen there, he is also saying that, oh, by the way, what a surprise here, it's the same conditions that we've said, I don't know, back to 2014, 2015, 2021, 2022, all the way through to today, earlier this summer. What a surprise. And yet it seems that does leave people with a lot of surprises. And there's a lot of things going on today here. A lot of things going on the diplomatic channel, a lot on the military front, on the front lines. And to try and help us make sense of this, we have today with us, I hope, Herr Patrik Baab, German journalist and author. Patrik, can you hear me? Well, we've been having some technical difficulties. Gary, we'll see if we can try this again in a minute.
I don't know what it is. I can't hear you.
Okay, Gary, let's go ahead and roll with this. Sorry for the delay, folks. We just had some technical difficulties. We've never had this problem with Mr. Baab before, and we really hope we can get him back. We'll try it again here shortly. But the show has to go on, as they say. We're going to continue moving on with that. Interesting here comment. Now, this is a lot. I mean, I've actually seen some commentary in our chat here already. Lots of rumors have been floating around, at least in the Western press, that there was some kind of an issue between Putin and Lavrov. And some even suggested Lavrov was going to be fired by Putin, which was going to be a pretty major event if it had happened. But the Russians, of course, all during that time said, no, that's not the case. And I don't know why it would be. I mean, he is literally the dean of all diplomats worldwide for the last couple of decades. Has a track record just unmatched by anybody. You may recall some of the claims were that after the last 2.5 hour phone call between Trump and Vladimir Putin, in which case they said they were going to set up and have a phone or a meeting between Lavrov and Rubio, and then that was going to set up a meeting in person between Trump and Vladimir Putin in Budapest, Hungary. And then that fell apart really shortly. That I think after there was a terse phone call between Lavrov and Rubio, like right afterwards, which everybody thought was just to set the next level up, the next meeting. And instead, apparently it went really bad. We still don't know all the details, but it went really bad. And then everything was off the table after that. The claim was that Putin blamed Lavrov for that, but that just never really washed with me. I mean, if you know anything about Russian politics, and especially the relationship between Lavrov and Putin going back so very many years, and Putin's engagement with Donald Trump, nobody could be surprised that Trump changed his mind on a dime. And I can't even imagine the possibility of Putin blaming Lavrov. We don't really know. Maybe Lavrov was sick. Maybe he was off the screen for a while. It's unclear exactly what it is that was causing all this and what they thought might have been the problem. But now then we see, here he is. He's back. You see there's some of the headlines right there. But the Russians said, no, that's not the case. And then now here today, here's Lavrov saying, yeah, I'm still here. I haven't been fired. And by the way, I'm willing to talk to your counterpart there. But this is not the only one. In fact, it's important to understand and acknowledge the consistency, the remarkable consistency of the Russian position. It hasn't mattered anything. What's happened on the front lines, what's happened in various European capitals, what's happening anywhere. The Russians have maintained the same position. We will seek a negotiated settlement on terms that we find satisfactory, or we will continue fighting on the ground until we have seized by force of arms what we need for our national security. They've never said anything like that since. And that means denazification, as the Russians define it, which means all this hostile government in the Ukraine side that has existed since 2014, since what they call a coup that brought into power and deposed from power what was a relatively pro-Russian leadership. And ever since that time, there's been this hostile policy, and then it metastasized in 2022, and according to the Russians and their view of things. And so they say, we're not going to end this war or through either negotiations or military until that gets resolved, because that's one of what they call the core problems of this war, the core causes of the war. So denazification, demilitarization, they said they won't even allow a military power on their border that has the capacity later on to start a new war, i.e. they won't allow any kind of NATO, no security cooperation with European states. And in fact, they're going to have basically a rump military on top of on top of a rump Ukraine. I mean, that's what they're saying there. And then, of course, there's the territorial requirements. There's the changes inside their constitution that says they have to provide for the protection of the Russian-speaking population and all the minorities there. All those things. That's what they have said virtually from the beginning. And they're not saying anything different today. So, yes, they're willing to talk, they say, but only under those conditions. Seems pretty unlikely to me we're going to get that. And then you also have to look at it does have to do with the front lines. And the city of Pokrovsk has all but fallen. There's still a toehold by the Ukrainian side on the outskirts of some of these places. The Russian air campaign is just having a catastrophic impact on all of Ukraine. The entire capital was knocked out over the weekend of electricity and power. I think it was like out for somewhere between 14 and 18 hours in totality. The images coming out of Kyiv were just amazing and stunning in a negative way for the residents there. I actually communicated with some folks who had direct access into Kyiv, and they said it was just terrible. There's the electricity gets knocked out. You also lose heat and everything to do anything. And there was just this eerie kind of strange look where you had car headlights and the entire rest of the city was virtually out. The Russians haven't stopped. I mean, that literally continues on, and there's no evidence that it's going to stop anytime soon. So they brought the power back up after a while, but one can imagine, and the reports coming out are that they're on like big time emergency backups. They're hooking together with baling wire and shoestring and bubble gum, anything they can just to get it back on, but it's a temporary situation, and all it takes is just a little bit to knock it back out, and they could go even further to where you don't have the capacity for emergency backup. So things could get much, much worse. And then you have on the battle with, like I say, Pokrovsk has fallen, Mirnograd is now surrounded. Kupiansk has lost yet more territory, and there's every reason to think the Russians are going to go onto there. Slavyansk and Kramatorsk are increasingly at risk, and they also are getting more airstrikes. The Zaporizhia area, the Kherson area, all along the front, the Russians keep moving up. So in light of that, Russia says we're still willing to talk. I think I showed you late last week where Zelensky was just incredulous and said, all we're trying to do with this now 20th sanctions package they're trying to put together, they want to force Russia to come to the table. And as Sergey Lavrov is now graphically depicting, they're at the table. They've never left the table. But what I almost say what Zelensky means with the words that come out of his mouth is that he wants Russia to come to the table on terms that he likes, and they want to put Russia under enough pressure that would make them change their views. I guess that's what he means, but that's not what he's saying. He wants to bring them to the table. But if they're already at the table and they're saying, here are the terms, and you're unwilling to acknowledge those terms or meet them, then all you're doing is leaving the Russians with the opportunity that we're going to do it one way or the other. And I think it was September in Beijing, President Putin himself said, we will either get this negotiations or we'll get this at the battlefield. It's one way or the other. And so right now it's the other, and it's having its effect both at the tactical front and in the strategic air campaign, and of course off the front lines in the battle for defense industrial base capacity. No matter what, everything that the West is doing, it's not even coming close to meeting what the Russians are doing and continue to accelerate. But Mark Rutte has claimed that, yes, but they actually are. In fact, he said over the weekend that we're closing the gap, that we're nearly there. We're able to produce almost as much as the Russians are in some key categories. I don't know what categories he's talking about. I'll believe it when I see it, because we know that just a handful of months ago, all this claim that the Mark Rutte himself, we've showed you this. I bet it was less than 3 months ago, where he himself said that Russia was outproducing by a factor of 3 what the entire West was putting together in terms of artillery shells and several other key components. And now, 3 months later, suddenly they're close to parity. I mean, that doesn't pass the common sense test. And you see it at the battlefront. If that was the case, there would be a lot more firepower on the front already if they were even close, and we don't see that. So that just shows you that there seems to be more and more of a dysfunction and a disconnect between reality and what the Western leaders are saying. And as we always point out, and you can see it with your own eyes, the Ukrainian men at the front line are the ones who pay for the price. They're the bill payers. The people of Ukraine, now then the ones not even at the front, but living in Kyiv, in Lvov, in Kharkiv cities, in Odessa, they keep paying the price of this. And they're living in fear all the time. It's absolutely incredible. And yet, instead of recognizing, they know what the Western side knows what the actual balance of defense industrial base capacity is. We know that. But here is what Mark Rutte is saying just in the last few days. Here's where his mind is.
We call it peace through strength. And NATO will do its part, and we need industry to do yours. I'm confident that together we have what it takes to outgun, outproduce, and outsmart those that seek to harm or diminish us. To do this well, we should focus on 3 key drivers: quantity, creativity, and cooperation. First, on quantity, we already have state-of-the-art systems, the best of the best. These give us an edge, and we will keep it sharp. But we need more, and we need it fast, and that means increasing production and shortening delivery times.
And I see, do we not have Patrik Baab down there? I thought I saw him.
No, he's not here, Danny. Not yet. He's still working on it. There's nothing.
Still working on it. Okay. Well, hopefully, just keep those gears grinding, because I'd love to have him back. But in the meantime, let's take a look at what Mark Rutte was saying there. First of all, it's just nonsense. What do you mean that we have the state of the art everything and that we have the advantage? I mean, everything that you said just a few months ago was that the Russian side has the advantage, and you had to ramp up all this kind of stuff. And no one is going to believe that in a few months you have reversed that. But in any case, you definitely don't have an advantage under any circumstances. And yet that's the words coming out of his mouth. And what that tells you is, and what that graphically shows, is that no matter what is happening on the ground or in the air in Ukraine, the dwindling number of troops that the Ukraine side has, the growing number of troops that the Russian side has, there's not even the pretense or the willingness to talk actual diplomacy. There is nothing that the West is doing to bring this to a diplomatic end, to say, all right, this is ugly. This is a terrible situation. How can we end this? Let's talk to him. So Sergey Lavrov is willing to talk to Rubio. I hope he does. Certainly Trump has an open channel of communication with Putin. So that seems to be open. The United States is open. Where is Europe? Why is there no communication going on at that level with Russians? How come the only thing they're willing to talk about is more military capacity, more arms, more weapons themselves, more long-range missiles, etc., more interceptor missiles? Why is that the only thing they want to talk at? And I mean the only thing. If you're fighting a conflict with someone and you see that they have an overwhelming capability that you in all the key categories, and the best that you can ever do is just to slow the rate of the advance, but at some point there will come a mathematical point that no one can predict yet, but it will come to where you'll have a snap, and the integrity of the defending capability of your side will collapse and shred. It's just a mathematical certainty at some point. And the only thing you want to do is talk about more ammunition and weapons. As I've said too many times, all that does is virtually guarantee that the only path you're leaving to your opposite side is to continue with that advantage until they have destroyed your side. Why would you want to do that? Where is the advantage to Ukraine? And where is even the advantage to your side? But that's not where we're at. It's not where we're going. And that's what Europe is saying. Well, a major part of the blame for this is the leader of Ukraine himself. because it takes, so-called two to tango, and there's definitely a lot of tango going on between Brussels and Kyiv. And brother Vladimir Zelensky says that, as a matter of fact, he's trying to just paint this and say, let's do even more of that, because, my goodness, Russia's already at war with Europe.
Drones in Poland, with drones this week in European airports in Belgium. I mean, Russia says it is at war with Europe, but some people in Europe don't think Europe is at war with Russia. Do you think Europe is at war with Russia or not yet? What's your assessment?
Я думаю, що не Європа у стані війни з Росією, а Росія у стані війни з Україною і в принципі, гіпотетично з багатьма в Європі. Ми розуміємо, на що вони здатні і що вони можуть зробити, але Європа так боїться слова ескалація. І вони завжди думають, що кроки Європи, так як вони розвинуті держави, з повагою до закону і цінностей, і їм здається, що будь-яка їх відповідь – це ескалація. А я вважаю навпаки, що Росія не любить слабкість.
Yeah, that's good enough right there, Gary. They're just afraid of escalation. What a dumb thing. Well, now listen, if you're the president of Ukraine, obviously you would love, and you have from day one, to have all of the military from any other country, all of them if possible in Europe, to come and fight on your side. So you would love to have that. And now then, though, to mock them, to say, all you're worried about is escalation. Well, yeah, no kidding. That's what they're supposed to be. They're supposed to be focused first and foremost. Every state in Europe is supposed to be first focused on their own country and their own national security, on their own economic security, etc. And then, and only then, work on a cumulative basis, on a cooperative basis. How can we all strengthen ourselves together financially, economically, national security, etc., so that you have the synergy possibility going on? Perfectly valid. And where it makes sense, let's do that. But any kind of cooperation like that has to be, we will participate in a joint venture as long as the net is an increasing of the strength and protection and safety and prosperity of our country. If continue to go down that path of multilateral anything means that we're at more risk, i.e. escalation, then they have an obligation to their people who elected their government in every one of these 32 NATO countries. They have an obligation not to go down a path that could lead to escalation. The point is not that let's all put all of our national security at risk so that we can help Ukraine, except that you can't. Because there's no getting into a fight will only now open your country and your troops up to death and destruction and bombardment. There's no value to it. Now, there may be some that would think, yeah, but what you can do if everybody gets into the war with Russia, then that will make Russia finally realize they can't win, and then they'll stop. Are you ready to sacrifice Paris? Are you ready to sacrifice London, Berlin, your troops, Romanian troops, Lithuanian troops? Y'all ready to add to the death toll? Right now, there's no war. So consider this. Right now, if you use diplomacy, the war can be brought to an ugly end. It would be bad for Ukraine. No ifs, ands, or buts. Definitely it will be bad for Ukraine compared to where it was. But as I've told you too many times to count, that's because of our unwillingness to do what made sense years ago. But we'll talk on that another day. We're talking about where we are right now. You can have a negotiated settlement that's ugly for Ukraine right now, but the war is over. Nobody from Paris dies. Nobody from the UK dies. Nobody from Italy dies, Romania, Spain, any other country, or America. Nobody else dies from that. There's no more war. It goes on. Now, you want to say, we want to have a deterrent and we want to build up our armed forces so Russia doesn't, once they have consolidated Ukraine, they'll come for us. That's nonsense. But if you believe that, fine. make your own national defense, make yourself stronger on the eastern flank, do all what you need to do to prevent Russia from doing that. And we've seen, if you paid any attention at all through this war, is that the defensive form of war is much stronger than the offensive. And even Ukraine in the defensive since late 2023 has slowed Russia down to where it's a very, very high cost for Russia to have these even incremental gains. And Herr Baab, do we have you? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes.
I don't know what it was. I had some technical problems, so something's wrong with my connection.
Super glad that we got that.
Probably the NSA cut it down.
But we're here, and that's what matters the most. And one of the things we're talking about right here, and perfect timing for you to come in, is this just nearly insane layout, mathematical calculation, I don't know what it is, mindset that the Western side has, that instead of coming to a rational acknowledgement that it's in our interest to have a negotiated settlement, instead we keep going down the road of potential escalation. And you just may have just seen there, Zelensky mocked the Europeans for even worrying about escalation. What is the mindset on the European side? Why will they not come to this point to where they'll act in their own self-interest and instead keep going down a path that could lead to escalation?
So from my point of view, the Ukrainian people doesn't matter. Ukrainians are brought to the butcher on the table of Western interests. And the interest is to unbalancing and to weakening Russia. And this is the strategy of the United States. And now we have a situation that for President Trump, it seems to be not so helpful to go on with this war, but he is blocked by the deep state of the United States. And these people in the Pentagon, in the CIA, and in the administration of the United States, and also the majority in the Republican Party is cooperating with European leaders. And the political survival of European leaders depends on this war, as the political survival of Mr. Zelensky does. And Mr. Zelensky is surrounded by Galician right-wingers and fascists. And the survival of those people depends on the war, so they won't stop. This is also a fight of the political elites in Ukraine and in the European Union and in the UK as well, against their own people.
And I mean, just help us understand why that would be. Why would anyone, even if there are this so-called deep state, why would they want to take action that would be counterproductive to their own people? What is the bigger agenda here?
So the agenda is to go on in weakening Russia. That's the main goal of this policy. And we had a press conference of the German government some days ago, and the speaker said, we want peace as well, but we want peace against Russia. And this is a declaration of war. When I was in Karelia in June this year, so I saw that the Russian Federation is constructing new missile positions in the forests over there. That means the Russian Federation is preparing for a great war with Western Europe, with the European Union and the UK. So Mr. Merz, Mr. Macron, and Keir Starmer know that they cannot go into this war without the help of the United States. And this is why they want to keep the United States, Washington, in this war against Russia. This is the agenda. So it's a self-destructing agenda.
But is this, if it, let's just concede for the moment that that's the case. If it were so, these people aren't stupid. They're probably highly educated, very smart. But you can want that outcome all day long. And let's just say, just divorce from morality. Yes, you want to have this so that you can submit, cause the Russian Federation to submit to your desire so that you can have hegemony and all that stuff. But when you look at the balance of power and the balance of forces on each side, and I'm even including Western NATO in this at the moment, you can see that there is virtually no way that you can get that done. You can reverse that at an acceptable cost that would allow you at the end state, even of this dynamic, to where you would have anything except a smoldering ruin on your side. I don't see any side of even the hypothetical outcome that would leave these so-called deep staters in a position that's better than where they are now. How do you see it?
Well, I have to say, from the position of a clear-thinking man, you would stop this war as soon as possible. And Lavrov said recently, the only way to stop this war is to meet the Russian demands. That means a neutral Ukraine out of NATO, a government in Kyiv which is more neutral or pro-Russian, but not a fascist government, and the 4 oblasts, which came to the Russian Federation after the referenda in fall 2022, will stay Russian. And the European leaders don't want to meet these demands. And now we arrived at the 19th sanction package of the EU. And all the first 18 sanction packages were completely senseless. They backfired like a boomerang. And to go on doing the same thing and expecting different results, this is, from my point of view, the definition of completely craziness and madness. And it is part of the decline of the West that many countries in NATO are run by a crazy and degenerated elite. And that's the background. They cannot think in a clear way. They are destroying their own countries for their own survival.
Well, that's kind of the way it looked, but I was hoping there would be another sentence on there, like a however. But I want to keep going down this path. You brought up this issue of the deep state. There was an interesting exchange just a few days ago in British television, to where very short time former Prime Minister Liz Truss was asked about this whole issue of a deep state. And she made a very interesting comment here, basically saying, hey, we, the so-called elite, are actually victims of the deep state. Watch this.
Well, let's talk about the state, or more specifically, the deep states. You say the Bank of England sabotaged you. The Treasury, the civil service. Tell our viewers and listeners about this deep state and the people who really are controlling our governments.
I think it's important for people to understand, because people think the Prime Minister is all powerful or the Chancellor is all powerful, and they can go into government and they can just pull the levers and things will happen. But actually, the government is controlled by the permanent bureaucracy, by the civil service. It's them who hire and fire the people that work in the government. They control the budgets of each government department. Okay. They make the decisions about how policies are implemented. So even if a policy has been signed off by a minister, it's a civil servant who says whether it's legal. It's a civil servant who implements it. It's a civil servant who signs off the budget for it. And that gives those people a lot of power.
So it turns out that, the Liz Trusses, the Keir Starmers of the world are just pawns in the hands of these unelected bureaucrats. What do you say to that?
Well, I think Liz Truss, in this point, only in this point, is right. because the financial industry, especially in the United States, and the military-industrial complex is making a lot of money by this war. And the state bonds are held by financial investors in the shadow banking system, in the unregulated shadow banking system. And those financial investors can bring under pressure every state who don't want to go on with this war. And they are making a lot of money by, for example, selling out the bonds. And this was very successful 30 years ago against the British pound. And it will work again. And that Mr. Merz want to continue with this war against Russia is, from his point of view, completely logical. So
right, but see, I would argue that, and the way I view it, and tell me if you disagree with this too, is that Truss is trying to, and many of the other leaders are, they're trying to blame the bureaucracy inside the government. But the stuff you're talking about there, like the defense industrial base, the military industrial complex, the banking system, et cetera, those aren't bureaucracy. Those are outside of the government, putting a lot of pressure on. And it seems to me, and again, tell me if you disagree with this, but when you have the Liz Truss, the Donald Trump, maybe even, and certainly Joe Biden before this, and Macron, Chancellor Merz, they seem to be working with these people a lot more than being just mere pawns of them. How do you see it?
Yes. So let's have a glimpse on the German administration right here in Berlin. These bosses of departments in the Foreign Office, departments in the financial ministry, they all wrote PowerPoint presentations and papers and files for their ministers for years. And now they would have to concede that these PowerPoint presentations they wrote were completely shit. And this is something they don't want to do. So they will get fired because they made mistakes. They underestimated the Russian military and the Russian economic power, because nobody of these guys were ever in Russia. They know nothing, but they are feeling as great analysts. And let's have a glimpse to the European Union, the bureaucracy in Brussels. This is a anti-democratic warmonger bureaucracy. It's a kind of despotism against the member states. And this despotism and this bureaucracy will getting stronger and stronger by go on the war, because the war makes it possible to weaken the member states. Suddenly, Ms. von der Leyen is overtaking budget rights. So the EU doesn't have, the EU Commission doesn't have budget rights. This is in the duty of the member states, but the war makes it possible. So the central bureaucracy in Brussels is getting stronger and stronger by continuing with this war. And this is a war against the rights and the sovereignty of the member states as well.
Now that's on display right now with in Hungary with Viktor Orban, who is not playing along with that band, and he's pushing back significantly. And he was just here in Washington, D.C. just a few days ago, really doing his best to try and bring Trump over to his side. How do you see that battle within the European Union about member states succumbing to that pressure you're talking about from Ursula von der Leyen, or the Viktor Orbans and Robert Fico's trying to push from the outside?
Yes, those countries in Southeast Europe and in the European Union are depending on Russian oil and gas. And this is the only way to make a more Russian-friendly, for example, position. And this is an inner discussion. And on the other hand, those countries are getting a lot of money, billions of the EU, transfer billions. At the moment, the European Commission in Brussels try to give out Eurobonds, to make it impossible that those small member states could block the transfer to money into Ukraine anymore. So what was impossible to help in the financial crisis and the state financial crisis a decade ago for the poor people of Greece, now it is possible for the warmongers and the financial industrial complex and the military industrial complex. And you see right here the balance of power. I think possibly the EU Commission and the German government, who wants that, can manage to give out Eurobonds to bring in new debts. But if the Ukraine will come into the European Union, every financial transfer to the member states will be stopped and all the money will come to Ukraine, more than 180 billion of euros. And that means the European Union will break apart because the member states that are receiving money right now won't receive any money after the implementation of Ukraine. And that would be the end of the European Union. Possibly, this is in the interest of the United States to create a row of weak vassal states without any power against the United States. And then they can increase the tribute European countries have to pay because the single countries are so weak, they cannot stand to the United States. That's the point.
Now, we had a British economist on the show last week that is sounding alarm bells that there could be some significant economic downturn coming, no matter what anybody in London wants, in the coming year, in 2026. A lot of bells sounding. It's certainly not the only one here, but anything that happens in UK is not going to be limited to that. It could also expand definitely to Germany, who's also weak. How do you see the potential for an economic, I won't go so far as to say collapse, at least not right away, but a downturn that could have negative implications on all the possibilities of even giving these bonds away, or at least of making them good?
Great Britain is facing a bailout by the International Monetary Fund. This is something I expect. I cannot evaluate the detailed situation in France, and the state budget in Germany is overloaded with debts, but compared to Great Britain and France, it's relatively stable. But the German economy is in full decline. We are losing jobs more and more, thousands of jobs. And the investment into the military sector will bring a short economic fire, not more. It's not a good investment on the long run. So I think the current government of Germany can only buy time to bring themselves after the next elections. And after the next elections, we could face a discussion if the alternative for Germany, AfD, must be part of a new coalition. We will see.
When is the new election? the next election?
In 3 years. In 3
Okay.
years. So we have to check if this government will survive 3 more years. So it's difficult to explain right now because the situation is difficult and it's different in every country. But it is clear it is a suicide strategy against their own countries. And the problem is the whole political class, all parties of the ruling party cartel all over Europe, in Germany as well, normally had to declare they made a lot of mistakes and we have to step back, but they don't want to do that. So it's just a question of personal survival of the political elite. And
what impact is that? No, we'll just keep it at Germany since that's obviously your home country there. What impact is that having on the general population, the not elite people? Are they, number one, are they even aware of what the elite are doing? And number two, to the extent that they are, what is their reaction to wanting to go down this militaristic and debt-ridden path?
Two different questions. Firstly, the average German is getting poorer and poorer because the prices are increasing, especially for food and for energy. Secondly, the average German doesn't show any protest against the government. The population, the majority of the Germans, is sleeping into the abyss. They don't want to do anything. And it is difficult to explain. It depends on the corona measures some years ago. Depends on the liberalization of the labor market. It depends on digitalization, and it depends on propaganda. So in the last point, the war in Ukraine and the Ukraine itself are very difficult topics to understand. You have to know something about the prehistory of the conflict, because this conflict started with the coup on the Maidan and not in February 2022. And the majority of Germans don't understand that. Two sides of this. The first side is the propaganda spread by the mainstream media every day. And the other side is most Germans don't want to understand that. But they fear that if the check will come of this war, they have to pay this check, that their savings will be gone. And nobody wants to face this sad reality in Germany.
And did they, to the extent that you can characterize it, does the general German population, do they believe some of these claims that the Russians are coming for y'all? If they get rid of Ukraine, they're definitely coming to Berlin next. Do they believe that?
Yes, it's completely crazy, but many Germans think Mr. Putin will be knocking at their door the day after tomorrow. And they don't understand that this is completely crazy, because Russia has everything Russia needs in its own country. They have energy, they have minerals, they have food, they have everything. And they are not interested in conquering Western European states who are completely in economic trouble. They have enough trouble in their own country with connectivity, for example, and producing energy and producing cars and everything. So they don't want Western Europe. And this is something Putin declared in his speech 4 days ago at the day of unification of Russia. He told the public, the Russian public, we are not interested in European culture and economy. We are living right here in our own culture. We are stronger related to Asia than to Western Europe. And we don't want to have Western European individualism. Our state is built on families, children, and the community of the people. And this is a completely different approach. We don't see we don't only see a fight of economies or a fight at the front line. This is a cultural conflict as well. And Russia will win this conflict.
Point.
That's the point. And so most Germans think Putin will be knocking at their doors the day after tomorrow. But this is completely crazy. It is a way of double think, as the British author George Orwell described it in his dystopia 1984, this doublethink. Different parts of reality or of thinking don't compare to each other, but it works in the minds of the people because their minds are destroyed. They cannot think by their own. They are completely outer-directed by propaganda.
Okay, and speaking of that propaganda, before I let you go here, one other issue that's kind of in the news right now that I definitely wanted to get your view on, and is directly related to what you just said here, and that's the issue of the Nord Stream pipeline blowing up, because there's information out this morning that the Nord Stream investigation in Berlin is splintering Europe over Ukraine. According to the article here in the Wall Street Journal today, for 3 years, a crack team of detectives gathered each workday morning around a whiteboard at the German Federal Police headquarters in Potsdam near Berlin. Now their investigation into who was behind the greatest act of sabotage in modern history, the bombing of the Nord Stream pipelines, which directly had a negative impact on German economic output, is threatening to splinter the support for Ukraine, the country they hold responsible. What is going on with this?
Well, I think the Wall Street Journal is wrong in its covering. The destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline is not a topic in German public. It is not, it's not a topic. And the investigations are not really investigations of the state attorneys. The state attorney, from my point of view, is trying to cover up the whole thing.
And why would they want to, I mean, just on this surface of it, sorry to interrupt you, but why would the Germans want to hush this up when they were the ones that were harmed probably more than any other country?
This is a war of the United States against Germany. And the German public and the majority of German people are afraid of the results of that. That means we had to leave NATO because the biggest enemy of the German interests are the leading state of the NATO. And that means we have to leave the NATO and we have to stop our support for Ukraine completely. But believe me, nobody in the German political class is encouraged to do that. They are
so they are genuinely okay with subordinating their national interests to Washington.
Yes, yes. German interests are sacrificed for aligning with the United States and their interests, because our elites are aligning with the elites in the United States. This is a kind of fluid elite, an international, a transatlantic elite. Those people are not interested in the welfare of German people. And well, the proof is right here in Berlin. We had never so many homeless people and so many beggars in the subway stations as we now have after this coalition of Olaf Scholz and with this coalition of Friedrich Merz. So those people are not interested in the welfare of their own country. They are interested in their own welfare and the welfare of their buddies in the United States.
And I guess in the last few minutes we have, if you can just, I guess to the extent that you can, kind of, how did we get to this point? Because ordinarily, conceptually anyway, any country is supposed to primarily look out for their own national interest, and then they'll cooperate with others as it benefits them. And to the extent that it doesn't benefit them or harm them, they'll distance or even stop. And yet that doesn't seem to be happening. How do we get to the point to where the German elite prioritize somebody else's benefit to the expense of their own?
I think, and I can show you many examples. The members of those German elites are dependent of their friends of the United States. They managed their careers in cooperation with transatlantic organizations like German Marshall Fund. They got grants in the United States, invitations for seminars and discussion rounds. They have probably real estate in the United States, in Florida. And they are member of the Young German Leaders, the Atlantic Bridge, and many other organizations. And during the Obama era, advisors of the United States government came to Germany and explained them how to manage the public discourse by financing non-government organizations who are not non-government, which are government organized non-government organizations. And those organizations are providing jobs for academics. And by leading their own country in the wrong direction, they can work for their own welfare and for their own career. And then you have this round door effect from the non-government organizations to the think tanks, from the think tanks into the government and the ministries, and from the ministries to the think tanks and the universities. And this is a process of job sharing and going around in this circle of jobs and managing their own careers. And they don't want to leave this bubble. They would destroy their careers. They couldn't make money anymore. As a dissident in Germany, you will face a lot of problems, like I do. Because it's not easy to stand up to the majority. And this is a transatlantically degenerated elite. This is a bought elite and a corrupted elite. Yeah.
Well, we can see the evidence of it all over the place, and you've just touched on a little bit of it here. And we're grateful, and we affirm you and your dissident operations, and encourage you to continue going on, and look forward to sharing your views here on our channel as well, because we need a lot more of that, both in Germany, the United States, and across the board, so that the people actually get a chance to have their say and to find out when they're being lied to by their own governments or these NGOs or any of these other transnational entities that are out for themselves at the expense of us. And we're grateful to what you do. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me here.
And we appreciate you guys too. Be sure and like and subscribe if you haven't. Also, to let you know, we will be back here in about 1 hour from now with Andrei Martyanov, and we're going to be looking at what's going on the Russia-Ukraine war from a little bit different perspective. Always a treat to get to hear Andrei. He's got some unique perspectives and sources you're not going to get anywhere else, folks, because we are unintimidated and uncompromised to bring you the truth on this issue here within Germany, within the United States, or anywhere in the Western world, because you deserve to know the truth, and we're going to give it to you. Thanks, folks. Look forward to seeing you this afternoon on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive.